She still thinks of you every single day. She hears your name not aloud, not from her own lips, but in the quiet of her mind. Your voice, your laugh, the energy you carried, it all still echoes for her. No matter how much time continues to pass, she hasn't truly let you go. And yet you'll never receive a message from her again. Not a call, not a like, nothing at all. Just silence. But even through that silence, she's watching. She sees what you post. She reads the words you write. She replays your last words in her mind. And yet you'll never really know. She might have erased you publicly, but inside her heart, you're still there. The truth is, she hasn't forgotten. She's simply too scared to let it show. And today I'm going to break it all down for you. Why she watches but stays hidden, why she avoids, and how your silence is quietly becoming the most powerful move you've ever made. This might just be the most important message you hear this year, especially if you've ever stared down at your phone, wondering why she suddenly went cold. If you've asked yourself how someone who once couldn't go a day without you can now act like you don't even exist, then this is for you. Support this channel, not just for the content, but because you're part of a movement, one that helps men rise, think clearly, and break free from confusion. When you support this channel, you're giving other men access to the same clarity you're about to gain. Let's talk about the invisible strings. She doesn't need to send you a message to feel connected to you, because, in truth, her silence is not really silence. It's deafening inside her head. Her thoughts say what her lips refuse to. Just when you start to believe she's forgotten, when you start to assume she's moved on, understand that something deeper is at play. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, she's still tethered to you. The silence that surrounds you, she hears it constantly, like noise she can't turn off. Every shared moment, every laugh, every late-night talk where you made her feel safe, it's all on replay in her mind. Not just once in a while, but often. Especially at night when the world quiets and she's left with her own thoughts. That's when it floods back. The emptiness she feels reminds her of everything that once filled her. These aren't vague, distant memories. They're vivid, precise. The unique way you said her name. The way your presence made her feel like the only one in the room. The small daily routines that became emotional anchors. Your morning texts, those random check-ins, the way you remembered little things no one else did. You didn't just make her feel important. You made her feel truly seen. And now she misses that version of herself, the one who felt so deeply understood. But she won't admit it. Not to you, not to her friends, not even fully to herself. She keeps it all tucked away. Still, the connection lives on, like invisible threads tying her mind back to you. She checks your stories. She lingers on your photos longer than she'd ever say. She casually asks mutual friends about you, pretending it's nothing. She even scrolls through old conversations, not because she wants to go back, but because she wants to feel something real again. But she won't message you. She won't break that silence. Because, in her world, acknowledging she still cares means surrendering the upper hand. Pride weighs heavily on her. The fear of rejection screams louder than the longing. She'll let you believe she's okay, that she's over it. But underneath that cool exterior, she watches, hoping you'll be the one who reaches out. What she doesn't realize is, you're not reaching out because you've come to understand your value. You're learning that silence can be strength. While she believes she's keeping control by saying nothing, what's really happening is that every invisible string she thought she'd severed is tugging harder than ever. She lurks but doesn't speak. Not because there's no connection, but because her silence is the loudest expression of everything she's still feeling. She isn't over you. She's not indifferent. She's drowning in the memories, but can't let one of them show. Maybe you scroll through your phone and wonder how someone who used to check in on you daily, who used to laugh at your jokes like you were the only man on earth, could now be so quiet. But what's visible on the outside isn't the whole story. This silence isn't healing. It's hiding. It's how she's surviving the emotional storm she's too afraid to face head-on. She remembers everything, not dimly, not vaguely, but vividly. In color, in sound, in emotion. The way you looked at her when she was falling apart inside, the timing of your messages, always somehow perfect, the way your laughter calmed her, the stability your presence gave her. She hasn't found that feeling again, and deep down, she questions whether she ever will. But she can't face those truths, so she fakes it. She puts on the mask, she posts photos, she replies texts with short words. But it's all just performance. Her heart is still lost in those moments you gave her, still haunted by what the two of you built. And when the world quiets again and she's alone with her thoughts, she can't escape the truth. That's when the emotions hit the hardest. She scrolls through your social media, her screen brightness turned low. She reads your captions, searching for signs. She replays your conversations, word by word, wondering what she could have done differently, what she could have said or not said to keep you. Sometimes she types out long messages, raw, vulnerable, honest, but she never sends them. Her finger hovers over that button. Her heart races, her thoughts spiral, and then she deletes everything. Not because she doesn't want to send it, but because she's terrified of your silence, of what it might say back. She clings to the illusion that she's unbothered, strong, in control. Her silence is her shield, her pride, the sword. Reaching out would be confessing she still cares. Calling would mean exposing that she's been watching all along. Vulnerability would shatter the control she so desperately clings to. So she suffers in silence. She wonders, she waits, but she never knows for sure. She tells herself, he'll message me, he always does. And when you don't, that's when everything starts to unravel. Each day you remain silent, you take back a little more power, not as a game, but as growth. You're learning that your value isn't dependent on her recognition. You're not looking back to find healing. You're moving forward to create it. And while she once thought silence would give her control, now it's her prison. While she thought ignoring you made her stronger, it only reminds her of what she lost. She was sure you'd fold, that you'd break and reach out, but you didn't. You stood firm. And that stillness speaks louder than anything else. It tells her you're not the same man she once knew. You found clarity, and that clarity, that strength, it's unforgettable. So while she watches and listens from a distance, pretending not to care, remember this. Every second you stay silent, every urge you resist, you're not just maintaining a boundary, you're delivering a message that echoes louder than any text could. One that says you no longer need her attention to feel worthy. You're the man who walks forward, even while she stays frozen. And that version of you, the one who doesn't chase, doesn't fold, doesn't beg, that version is the one she'll never forget. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. Your silence, it's not just a lack of words. It's a presence so loud it fills her thoughts. It isn't passive. It's deliberate. It isn't empty. It's layered with meaning. Your silence acts like a mirror, forcing her to face herself without the comfort of your attention softening the truth. She expected you to reach out. That wasn't just a guess. It was a calculation. One she made based on the man you used to be, the way you always checked in, the way you replied so quickly, the way you made her feel like she mattered more than anything. She believed the pattern would stay the same, that eventually the weight of the silence would be too much for you, that your emotions would overpower your discipline, that you'd reach out if only to feel something again. But you didn't, and that changes everything. The moment you chose not to react, not to run back, not to type that message and erase all the growth you've built, that's when the dynamic began to shift entirely. With each day that passes and you say nothing, she's forced to sit with the emptiness that she created. And that silence, it doesn't fade. It grows louder. It sharpens. It digs in deeper than any argument or apology ever could. Because this kind of silence, it doesn't plead for her attention. It doesn't ask to be heard. It simply stands tall, sure of itself. It says, I'm not waiting for you anymore. And when that realization finally lands for her, it hits hard. Because now, for the first time, she's not the one in control. She can't predict what your next move will be. She doesn't know if you're gone for good. That uncertainty, it starts to eat away at her pride. She begins to wonder, did he really move on? Is he honestly okay without me? Does he even still think of me? And right there, that's the turning point. The power she once held because she left, because she went silent, because she controlled the narrative, starts slipping right through her fingers. Your silence isn't just helping you heal, it's delivering a message. One that says you no longer need her response, her closure, her permission to move on. You've discovered strength not in chasing, but in holding still. And that kind of strength, that shakes her. Because she's used to men folding. She's used to apologies. She's used to being reminded that even when she pulls away, someone will always be there waiting. But you didn't wait. You chose focus. You leaned into your goals, your mission, your discipline. And that shift, it changes everything. It flips the frame. Because now, instead of her wondering whether you're okay, she's starting to question how she lost a man who became better without her. How she let go of someone who turned silence into a message, not a wound. Your silence doesn't just reveal strength, it reveals growth. It's a signal that you've stopped being emotionally dependent on her presence, that you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed her validation to feel whole. And that realization, it shakes her to her core, because it tells her the truth. She's no longer special, no longer the source of your emotional balance. You've reclaimed your power. There's something deeply magnetic about a man who can sit with his feelings and not be ruled by them. A man who doesn't chase chaos, who doesn't fight for validation, who lets go, not with bitterness, but with grace. That's the man you're becoming. Every single day you choose not to break the silence, you rewrite your story. You show yourself what it means to stand firm, not just in your emotions, but in your purpose. And even as she watches from a distance in silence, she sees it. She notices the difference. She sees your discipline. And that image, it lingers in her mind. It shakes her assumptions. It challenges everything she thought she knew about you, about men, about loss. Men who chase, they lose their edge. They surrender their power. They become forgettable. But men who sit in silence, who rebuild in stillness, who let go without noise, those men become unforgettable. They become legends in her memory. Because you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to beg to be respected. You don't have to reach out to be remembered. The real power lies in your presence, even when you're absent. The more you stay grounded, the more unforgettable you become. Not because of what you said, but because you didn't need to say anything at all. Inside her, there's a war no one else can see. It doesn't play out on her face or in her voice, but it's loud. It's deafening. On the surface, she keeps it calm. She smiles in photos, laughs during conversations, keeps her social calendar full, and posts stories that seem carefree. But none of that touches what's truly going on underneath. Beneath all that performance, a quiet emotional battle rages on, tearing at her. Her heart remembers you. It misses you in ways she can't put into words. Not because she hasn't tried, but because she's too proud, too afraid, too emotionally tangled to let it show. Every day that passes without you breaking the silence only intensifies that internal chaos. There's a part of her that wants to break, that longs for the warmth of your energy again, the safety of your presence, the peace that came with being truly seen. That part of her replays old moments like they happened just yesterday. The late-night talks, the comfort in your voice, the way you listened without judgment. These memories, they don't drift quietly by. They crash in waves. They hit her unexpectedly, at night when everything slows down, in the middle of a song that reminds her of you, during silent pauses in her day, when the feelings she tried to bury begin to rise. But every time, pride is louder. It tells her, don't be weak, don't reach out first. That voice inside her warns her, if you message him, you lose. So she doesn't. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares far too much. And vulnerability, that terrifies her. Being vulnerable means admitting she was wrong, or worse, that she still feels everything she claimed she left behind. So instead of messaging you, she becomes a quiet observer. She watches from afar. She checks your profile. She notices what you post. She sees when you're active. She even tries to read between the lines of your silence, wondering what you're thinking, who you're with, if any part of you still misses her too. There are nights when she comes close to breaking. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. She types out full messages, raw, emotional, unfiltered truth. She reads them back again and again. Her heart pounds, her breath shortens, and just before she hits send, fear pulls her back. Pride takes over. She deletes it all, not because she doesn't mean it, but because silence still feels safer, less risky. It protects her ego, even if it costs her peace. She chooses silence, not as a sign of strength, but as a shield against rejection. Because reaching out would mean giving up the illusion that she's unbothered, that she's moved on, that she's strong. To message you would be to admit that she still cares. To call you would be to confess that she's been watching all along. To show vulnerability would be to surrender the control she's clinging to. So she holds it all in. She would rather suffer in silence than risk being seen as weak. She would rather wonder forever than find out that you're truly fine without her. Because if you are, if you've actually moved on, if you're genuinely happier now, that truth would break her more than your silence ever could. But here's what she's betting on, that eventually you'll cave. She's convinced that you're still thinking about her, that you'll reach out eventually. He'll text me. He always does, she tells herself. But the longer you remain silent, the more that certainty unravels. Every day you don't reach out, she feels her grip loosening, her assumptions fading. You're not chasing. Not because you're playing games, but because you've grown. You're no longer the man who hands over his energy for scraps of attention. You're the man who's learned that peace doesn't come from reconnecting with the one who left. It comes from reconnecting with the part of yourself that forgot who you were when you lost her. She doesn't know what to do with this version of you, the one who doesn't react, who doesn't break, who doesn't fold. That stillness, it says everything. It shows her that you found something more powerful than comfort. You found clarity. And that clarity, that quiet certainty, makes you unforgettable. So while she keeps watching, even in silence, even from a distance, she sees the change in you. She notices the difference. She watches quietly, hoping you'll make the first move. But what she doesn't realize is that every second you stay silent, every moment you resist reaching out, you're not just setting a boundary, you're sending a message. And that message speaks volumes. It tells her, without a single word, that you're no longer the man who needs her attention to feel worthy. You're the man who walks forward, even when she remains frozen. And that version of you, the version that doesn't chase, that doesn't fold, that doesn't beg, is the one she'll remember for a long time. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. That's the true power of silence. Your silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a presence so strong it echoes in her thoughts. It isn't passive, it's intentional. It's not empty, it's full of meaning. That silence of yours acts like a mirror, forcing her to look inward without the distraction of your affection to shield her from the truth. She thought you'd be the one to break. She counted on it. She calculated her silence with the assumption that eventually you'd slip, that your emotions would override your growth, and you'd reach out like you always did. But you didn't. And because you didn't, everything begins to shift. Each time you choose not to react, not to chase, not to undo your progress with one impulsive message, you take back your power. With every unread conversation, every photo she lingers on, every time she scrolls through your profile in the dark, hoping to feel something familiar, you're standing still, grounded. And that groundedness sends a louder message than any emotional confession ever could. It tells her that this silence isn't weakness, it's strength. The more she sits with your silence, the more it consumes her. It's not something that fades with time, it deepens, it sharpens. It begins to cut into her in ways she never expected. Because this isn't the silence of someone waiting. It's the silence of someone who's done waiting, of someone who's chosen themselves. That's what scares her the most. Realizing that she's no longer in control. That she can't predict your next move. That she doesn't know whether you've already moved on. That silence, it becomes more powerful than any reply ever could. Because it means she no longer has access. Not just to your life, but to your emotions, to your thoughts, to the man she once believed would never stop caring. Now the power begins to shift. She begins to question. She wonders if she misjudged you, if she underestimated your strength, if she overplayed her silence. That uncertainty, it doesn't just rattle her, it unravels her. The silence that was once her strategy becomes her prison. It keeps her locked in a loop of questions with no answers. Because you're not just quiet, you're evolving. This silence isn't about revenge, it's not about punishment. It's not even about teaching her a lesson. It's about something deeper. It's about growth. It's about identity. It's about building a version of yourself that doesn't need to be seen to feel whole. You've stopped giving her the energy she used to take for granted. You've started giving that energy back to yourself. And now, while she watches from behind a screen, from behind a smile, from behind her pride, she realizes she's not watching the same man anymore. You're no longer reacting. You're no longer waiting. You're no longer craving her attention. You're busy becoming. And that realization, that's what truly stays with her. She expected you to chase her. She believed you'd come running back, just like before. That's what she was counting on, that you'd fold under the weight of the silence, that you'd reach out just to feel something again. But you didn't. And that single decision rewrote everything. The moment you chose not to respond, not to break, not to erase your growth with a message, you shifted the entire dynamic. Every day, you stay quiet, you force her to sit with the void she created. And that silence, it doesn't soften, it sharpens, it gets heavier, not lighter. It begins to carve into her more deeply than any apology or argument ever could. Because it's not a silence that begs for attention, it's a silence that holds power. It owns itself, it speaks clearly. I'm no longer waiting for you. And when that truth sinks in, it cuts differently. Because now she's no longer the one with control. She can't predict what you'll do next. She doesn't know if this is really the end, that uncertainty. It starts eating away at her pride. She begins to question, did he really move on? Is he truly okay without me? Does he even think about me anymore? That's where the real shift takes place. The power she once held, by being the one who left, the one who chose distance, the one who cut communication, slips away from her. Your silence isn't just your own form of healing, it's a message. A quiet but unmistakable signal that you don't need closure or conversation or even recognition to move forward. You found strength not in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. And that kind of strength, it's rare. It's unsettling, because she's used to men chasing her. She's used to being the one who's missed, the one who's needed. She's used to being validated, even when she disappears. But you didn't give her that. You focused on yourself. You turned inward. You leaned into your discipline, into your growth, into your mission, and that changed everything. It flipped the script. Now, instead of her wondering if you're still broken, she's wondering how she lost a man who became better without her. How she let go of someone who used pain as fuel instead of a cage, a man who didn't crumble under the weight of heartbreak, but rebuilt something even stronger from it. Because what you've created now, it's not about her anymore. It's not about proving her wrong or making her jealous. It's about becoming someone so secure, so grounded, so intentional that she can no longer reach you, not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. You've stopped seeking validation. You've stopped chasing closure. You've stopped replaying the past. Now your silence signals something else. It says you've outgrown the part of you that needed her to feel whole. It says you've reclaimed your peace. And that terrifies her. Because it means she's no longer special. She's no longer the center of your world. She's not the reason you smile or the reason you struggle. You've detached from the outcome. You've let go, not in anger, but in truth. There's something powerful about a man who can feel deeply but remain still. A man who can let go with dignity, without drama. A man who doesn't seek chaos but creates calm. That's who you are becoming. Every time you choose not to send that message, not to check her profile, not to fall into old habits, you're rewriting your story. Not just with her, but with yourself. And as she watches, even if she never says a word, she sees it. She sees the growth. She sees the discipline. She sees the difference. And that image, it lingers. It haunts her. It makes her question everything she thought she knew. About you, about love, about loss. Because men who chase can be forgotten. But men who evolve in silence, they become legends in her memory. You don't need to speak to be heard. You don't need to explain yourself to be understood. And you certainly don't need to reach out to be remembered. The real impact, what lasts long after the messages stop, is presence. And your presence now exists even in your absence. That's the shift. The more rooted you become in your purpose, the more unforgettable you are. Not because you said something powerful, but because you didn't need to. There's a war inside her, one the world will never see. On the surface, she seems fine. She smiles in pictures, laughs in conversations, keeps her social life active, and posts stories that scream confidence. But beneath that surface, where no one else can hear it, there's noise, constant, chaotic, emotional static that drowns her when she's alone. Because deep inside, her heart remembers you in ways she doesn't know how to express. Not because she hasn't tried, but because she's too scared, too proud, too stuck to show it. And every day that passes without a message from you, every hour that you remain silent, it doesn't give her peace. It feeds the internal storm. A part of her wants to give in. She wants to feel your energy again, the warmth of your presence, the peace of being seen, the safety she used to feel around you. That part replays the late-night conversations, the way your voice used to calm her, the patience in your listening. Those moments, they don't fade. They hit her in waves, sometimes unexpectedly, in the middle of a song, in the silence before she sleeps, in the gaps between distractions, when all that she buried begins to rise. But then pride steps in, that voice that reminds her not to look weak, not to be the one who reaches out first. Pride tells her, don't cave, don't lose control. And so she holds back, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much. Vulnerability terrifies her, because to reach out would mean admitting she was wrong, or worse, that she still feels everything she claimed she didn't. So instead of texting you, she watches, quietly. She checks your profile, notices what you post, sees when you're online. She even analyzes your silence, trying to guess what you're thinking, who you're talking to, and whether you're missing her too. There are nights when she comes close to breaking. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. She types out everything, long messages filled with truth, with honesty, with vulnerability. She reads them back, again and again. Her heart races, her breath shortens, and right before hitting send, she deletes it all. Not because she doesn't want to say it, but because the fear of your silence, of your indifference, is stronger than the longing. Because silence feels safer than rejection. Even if it costs her peace, she chooses pride. Even if it costs her clarity, she chooses control. But here's the thing, this isn't about her anymore. This isn't about what she feels, what she hides, or what she regrets. This is about you, your growth, your direction, your power. There was a time when her silence crushed you, when every ignored message felt like a personal failure. When you stayed up, wondering what went wrong, checking your phone for any sign that she still cared. That pain, it was real. It hollowed you out. But now, her silence doesn't break you, it builds you. Because you've stopped seeking her to feel whole. You've redirected your energy into the only thing that ever really mattered, yourself. You no longer obsess over what she's thinking. You don't analyze her posts. You're not haunted by the silence. Instead, you've made peace with it. You've taken the pain and turned it into discipline, into focus, into structure. You've created a life so intentional, so fulfilling, that her absence no longer leaves a void. It opens a path. You don't need her anymore. Maybe you once thought you did. Maybe there was a time when the idea of losing her felt unbearable, when your days revolved around her attention, her affection, her presence. But that time is over. What you actually needed wasn't her. It was the version of you who stopped accepting emotional scraps and finally demanded inner peace. That's the version of you that's been born through this silence. This is the real transformation. Not pretending to move on while secretly hoping she notices. Not trying to manipulate her emotions or play games to spark a reaction, but truly becoming someone new. Becoming a man who is so grounded, so centered, that her absence feels like freedom, not pain. The kind of man who doesn't seek validation because he's already validated himself through growth, through discomfort, through purpose. Now, while she sits in confusion, wrapped in pride, tangled in fear, you're not sitting still. You're moving. You're evolving. You're building something so solid that even if she were to return, you'd no longer need her to feel whole. That's what she didn't expect. She assumed you'd wait. She counted on your patterns. She thought your feelings would outweigh your discipline. But you didn't go back. You went inward. You leaned into your purpose. And that shift, it doesn't go unnoticed. Even in silence, she sees the difference. She might never say it. She might not like your posts or message you or tell her friends the truth. But she feels it. She feels the change. The silence that once comforted her is now unbearable. Because she's not just watching you disappear, she's watching you evolve without her. And that's what hits hardest. This is her real loss. It's not just the man she walked away from. It's the man you've become since. The man who used pain as fuel, who didn't beg to be understood but chose to become unshakable. You flip the dynamic completely. You're no longer the one waiting on a message, no longer hoping for a return. You're now on a path so intentional that looking back would only slow you down. She may have been the reason you fell, but you are the reason you rose. And that rise, it's not about revenge. It's not about proving her wrong. It's about proving to yourself that no external loss can define your internal worth. You've realized that healing isn't about reconciliation. It's about revelation, realizing you were always enough. The bigger picture has never been about winning someone back. It's about stepping fully into the man you were meant to become, not for her. Not to be noticed, but for you, for your legacy, for your peace. Every single day you choose clarity over chaos, purpose over pain. You build something she can't access anymore. A life that belongs entirely to you. A mind that's no longer reactive. A soul that can't be shaken by silence. And that's the greatest reversal of all. It's not revenge, it's not ego, it's indifference. Quiet, earned, powerful indifference. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. The kind that speaks with its presence alone. Let her wonder, let her scroll in silence, let her think. While you execute, while you build, while you rise. Because the man who no longer needs closure, who doesn't need contact or attention to feel valuable, is the man she'll never forget. Not because of who he once was, but because of who he became when she was no longer part of his story. Healing doesn't arrive in the form of an apology. It doesn't depend on a message you never got or a reunion that never came. Healing begins when you finally stop needing those things to feel whole. It starts the moment you stop waiting, stop checking your phone, stop replaying every what if in your mind. Healing begins when you sit with the silence and no longer fight it. Because something shifts when you stop resisting her absence and start accepting your own presence. You stop searching for answers in her actions and start uncovering clarity in your own growth. You stop looking for closure and realize you never needed it to move forward. The pain wasn't just there to break you down, it was there to open you up, to show you something you couldn't see while you were still inside the illusion of connection. That pain had purpose. It woke you up. There was a version of you who couldn't stand the silence, who thought that every quiet hour without her was a punishment. That version checked your phone too often, stayed up late hoping for a sign, and felt like you were losing pieces of yourself the longer she stayed away. That version lived in hope, in hurt, in hesitation. But he's not here anymore because something inside you shifted, slowly at first, then all at once. You stopped measuring your worth by her recognition. You stopped needing her to miss you in order to feel seen. And in that stillness, you discovered something deeper. You didn't just lose her, you found yourself. That's the part she can never touch. The clarity that comes from solitude, the strength you built in the quiet. The mirror you faced when the noise faded and only your reflection remained. And what you saw? It wasn't weakness. It was transformation. It was a man who gave too much to someone who didn't give enough. A man who confused loyalty with self-neglect. A man who was only half present in his own life while the rest of the world moved forward. But not anymore. That man woke up. He let the loss break him open instead of just breaking him down. And from that brokenness came something real. Not a harder man, but a stronger one. Not colder, but more grounded. Not bitter, but clearer. This man he's not chasing anymore. He's not hoping, he's building, growing, creating. And even if she thinks of him now, and she does, it's not the same. Because the man she once knew isn't the one she sees from a distance today. Maybe she thinks of you now, not always, but in those still, quiet moments. When a quote echoes something you used to say. When a song plays and the memory hits her like a wave. When she looks into someone else's eyes and feels nothing close to what she felt with you. In those seconds, you return. Not as the man she left, but as the standard she can't seem to forget. She remembers you. Not in vague pieces, but in sharp, vivid detail. The way you made her feel safe, seen, valued. The way your presence grounded her when everything else felt like chaos. And now that those feelings are gone, she finds herself reaching for them in places where they no longer exist. She thinks back, not with anger, but with realization. Realization of what she lost, of who you were, of what she took for granted when it mattered most. But she won't tell you that. She won't call. She won't admit it to her friends, or even to herself in full. She'll keep scrolling, watching, remembering, silently, because that's where the truth lives now. Not in dramatic texts or last-minute calls, but in the stillness of memory. And the man you've become? He doesn't need to hear it. He doesn't need that validation. Because you've made peace with the silence. Not because you had no choice, but because you chose growth over noise, direction over distraction. You've let go, not with bitterness, but with power. You smile now, not to prove a point, not because she might be watching, but because you're no longer looking back. You're too invested in what's ahead. You're not chasing what you were. You're becoming everything you're meant to be. That is redemption. Not loud, not angry, but calm, quiet, real. A transformation that doesn't scream, but is felt. In your presence, your posture, your peace. This isn't about being cold, it's about being complete. You don't carry resentment anymore, you carry wisdom. You don't hold on to longing, you hold on to direction. And now her silence doesn't carry the same weight. It's no longer something that defines your pain, it's a reflection of how far you've come. Because this was never about making her jealous. It was about remembering who you are. A man who doesn't chase, who doesn't fold, who leads his life with strength and silence. And if you're still here, still listening, it's because you're one of the few who are truly ready for that level of clarity. Support this channel not for me, but for the man who still has no idea why she vanished. For the one still caught in the noise of her silence. Your support helps us reach him, and together, we build something unshakable. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.